does hand-in-hand parenting work when your partner doesn't do it? Yes, it does. And if that's enough for you, that's all you need is the reassurance. You can go ahead and stop the video now. You're good to go. You do not have to be parenting the same way as your partner or even your ex. But if you want to know how and maybe some strategies to help you do this successfully, hang on with me for a few minutes and I will give you some information that I think will be useful. So, in order to thrive, actually, kids need a place that they can fall apart. They need a place where they can show just how hard life feels for them right now, how difficult it is. They do need a place like that, but they don't need the entire world to be that place. In fact, I would argue that it's our responsibility as parents not to just give them the emotional support that they need to be able to grow into the emotionally intelligent beings we want them to grow into, but we also need to prepare them for the many kinds of people and situations that they are going to encounter as they navigate life, as they move through the world. And it would be actually irresponsible for us to set the expectation out there that everybody's going to just listen when you have big feelings come up. That's just not the way things go. So just to give you an example of what I mean, once when my boys were young, one of them came home saying some very nasty swear words. One of them started with an F. We'll just leave it at that. Okay? He was very young. He was, kindergarten maybe? Young. But had older brothers. So, oops, I guess that just identified him. But that's okay. Anyway, so he was swearing. He was coming home and he was saying all of these nasty words, and sometimes at us to see what the response was, and sometimes just sort of blurting them out. In any case, what I decided to do was to create a safe space in my car for him to be able to experiment. And on the way to school in the morning, we would have these swear fests where we would say the car on the way to school when we have nobody else in it and our windows are up. That is our safe place for us to just swear and say all the bad words we can. And we'd have a lot of fun and we'd laugh and I'd say, okay, what is the worst word? What are the worst words you can think of? And they would blurt out, things that weren't even bad words. They didn't even know, they were so young. But anyway, it was super fun. But there was a part B, and that part B was, okay, when we pull up to school, no more. Because if you were to say that F word and all the other words in your classroom or to another kid at school, the consequence would likely be that you would be sent to the principal's office. If you say those words to your friends when you're playing, or even out loud with your friends when you're playing at their houses on a play date, for example, and parents hear, the reality is those parents might not ask you back. So it's this balance of information and a safe space for them to heal and feel and get the support that they need and deserve. So we can apply this same idea to partnering and parenting. So let's see what that looks like. So there are a couple of misconceptions that I want to break apart for you because I think it's going to be useful in terms of you buying into this idea, believing me that it is okay if you and your partner or even your ex parent differently. So we have this misconception that our co-parent, regardless of whether or not they live in the same home as we do, must parent in the same way that we do in order for our kids to thrive. It's kind of funny because we don't do that with other things, and we can, when we're not feeling emotional, notice that there are actually lots of ways to do pretty much anything, right? So, some of you probably tie your shoes with, where you make the separate loops and then you put them together, and I don't know how to do it that way, so it's hard for me to explain, but you know what I mean. Those of you who tie your shoes that way know that that's the way you do it. I actually do that knot first and then the bow, wrap around the bow and then pull it through. They both work, right? I tie my shoes, you tie your shoes. You might be thinking, okay, well, that's a bit different than parenting. Not so much on the table, the stakes are low, right? Okay, but we don't do that with other things either. Let's say our partner is looking for a job. They might spend a lot of time on LinkedIn or doing a lot of research about different companies or whatever it is, and we might, when we look for a job, say, you know what, I'm not so into like that research piece, I just want to go out and start talking to a lot of people. Both ways will probably land you a job in the end, but the route there is different. And I want to encourage you to think that same way about parenting. Because the truth is that kids are super, super flexible. They're super flexible. And usually they get what we can handle as parents. They do get that. And we parents, we need enough wiggle room from our partners to be able to forge our own paths and build the confidence in ourselves that we are in fact good parents. It's much more beneficial to the kids when we can both grow into our own confidence, and that confidence can be about doing things the same way, or it can be about doing things different ways. So for example, I've got a client who's a solo mom. She's divorced, she's got 2 boys, and in her situation the stakes were really high because she was struggling with 2 little guys who were acting out aggressively towards her, and it was incredibly triggering to her, and she was actually, when I first met her, getting hurt. So the stakes here were high. Now her ex is very traditional in his parenting, so just what that looks like: punishing, consequences, shaming, that type of thing. A caveat here: I'm not saying he's bad. He's doing the best that he can. And we'll just leave it at that for now. But the point of this video is to show you that he and she are doing it differently. And it actually turned out okay. She was concerned that it wouldn't. But what we did is that we talked about and taught her how to set limits in a really loving way and a firm way. She also went out and found people, community, who would support her in her pursuit of peaceful parenting and implementing the hand-in-hand parenting tools, so she wasn't alone, okay? And her boys are thriving. Her boys are thriving. And still, when they're at her house, they do a lot of stay listening, a lot of big feelings come up. She sets firm limits around aggression, and they get to feel all the upset that comes up. And when they're at their dad's, they don't have that opportunity. So yes, it's true that sometimes it feels like a lot to handle because that valve of stress and upset and hurts isn't getting to be released at their dad's because they know that he can't handle that. That's not his way of parenting. But they also know that mom can. So as long as she's getting the support that she needs, which she is, then her boys will be thriving because she can support them in the way that we know works super, super well. My husband and I also don't parent the same way, believe it or not. So I am definitely like the hand-in-hand parenting person. He is not. But once, when the kids were really young, we had an issue around guns, play guns. So I, as you maybe or maybe can't guess, was very anti-gun. So it felt very uncomfortable. In fact, it felt terrifying to me to allow my kids to have Nerf guns or to play at all with guns. And he set a limit with me. He's like, look, Tasha, we all grew up playing with guns, and if we didn't have the Nerf guns to play with, these are play guns, by the way, not like playing with real guns, please. So, we all grew up playing with Nerf guns, and if we didn't have them, we turned everything into a gun. And we turned out just fine. We really did. Like, we're peaceful, and we're it's a phase, and they'll move through it. Let them explore. Let them, let them just play it out for themselves. And I was scared. I mean, honestly, I was really, really worried for my boys' future. And so I sat back and I thought to myself, okay, what is really important to me? So I felt like I'm super triggered. I didn't want to play that with them. That wasn't a game that I could play. And I didn't want the guns, even the play guns, shot at me. It felt too uncomfortable for me. I couldn't handle it emotionally. So I just set that limit. But I did let them grab the sticks and the Nerf guns and whatever and play all over the house. And that's how it started. And in the end, I actually got super into it. And by the end, I mean over a period of months where I was able to work on my own, feelings about that. and what was hard for me about it, and then come in and play with them. And it was so fun. I mean, we'd have like Nerf gun fights around outside the house, inside the house, running up, running down, so much laughter, so much connection. So I actually was able to learn from the situation. But we started out at this place where our idea of parenting was really different. We had to talk about it and figure out, okay, what decisions do we want to make here? And I stepped back and let him take the lead there. Another story that I wanted to share is a father who I'm working with. Now, his wife is having nothing of hand in hand. She's like, no way, I am not into this. But he is committed, he feels passionate about it, and he's working right now on really learning to set limits firmly and lovingly. This is a theme here. Particularly around homework issues with his little guy. So what that looks like is that after school, there is a lot of emotion, right? It's loud, and he says, you know, sweetie, time to do homework. And his boy, you know, is like, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry. And in the past, what he was doing was like getting him water and getting him a snack. But what he noticed is that it didn't matter how long he put it off, how many excuses he agreed to, in the end, the upset came. So we talked about bringing that limit early, listening to that upset, and then the boy is able to move to the table and do the homework. But that's a little bit of an aside. So the issue here is that the mom is super triggered by these big feelings. But what's happening now is she's letting the father bring that limit and listen to the big upset that's happening. But when she gets to a place that she can't handle it anymore, she comes in and she's like, okay, time to do homework. And she just brings that firm limit and essentially is like, I can't deal. And that's okay. We're working towards a place where she can come in more peacefully, more lovingly, or perhaps give him a sign like, I'm done, I can't listen anymore. Or maybe she can learn that it's okay when she starts to feel more comfortable with it and start seeing more of the results, that she can maybe just go into another room or cover her ears so she doesn't have to listen and let him do the work. So he's not expecting her to do it the way that he does, but they're working towards a place where she can kind of step back in a place where she's triggered and let him lead. Kind of like the gun story that I just told you. Okay, so there's some good policies that I think are really useful to implement when we're talking about partnering in our parenting with somebody who we live with or with an ex. So the first one is just to let whoever's parenting parent. Just let them parent. No horrible, things are going to come of it. One thing that I would say, a caveat here, is that obviously if there is physical aggression or if there is like really intense shaming or isolation and punishment, then please seek help. Okay, that is something that a professional needs to support you through. We need to keep our kids safe for sure. But if the situation is just a difference in styles and one parent is, for example, sending a child on timeouts while the other is moving in and stay listening, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean it won't work. It will actually still work, because remember, a child just needs one place to be able to let that steam off that rattling top of the boiling pot, right? It's like they might have to keep all these sides down, but as long as they can open up that one side with you, that tension, those hurts, those upsets, those disconnects are all gonna heal, okay? What was I going to say? Oh, another thing you can do is to have a conversation about what each of you is good at, and also where each of you struggles. So we mostly depending on how we were parented and how we grew up, we have different strengths. So some of us might be better at play, like we can get silly with our kids and be goofy and maybe have pillow fights and wrestling matches and all of that stuff. Some of us feel really tight and uncomfortable around that. That's okay. Work to your strengths. I'm not saying don't work on getting better in the areas where you feel like you're weaker. I think that should be a goal of all of us. But also, let's play to our strengths, right? If you're horrible at science, you're not going to go be a doctor. That's fine. You can be fabulous at something else. So if you're good at play, go for it. If you're good at listening, if you're the one that doesn't get triggered when your child's having big feelings, then you be the main one who does that and allow your partner to step away, like in the example that I just talked about with the dad and the homework and the mom who's being triggered. The other thing I was going to say is that notice where, and I mentioned this a moment ago, notice where you're triggered in particular. So for example, in my family, my husband is very triggered around issues around food. He's struggled with weight issues his entire life and his relationship with food. It's not a secret. He knows that, I know that, the kids know that, and we just have an agreement. When there are upsets on the part of the kids around food, I'm the one who steps in. So just last night, for example, he made this beautiful dinner, tofu, rice, green beans. It was amazing. It was so, so good. And my youngest, who is at the moment 12, or almost 12, said, you know, I'm not eating all this thing. I'm not eating that. It's disgusting. I hate tofu. And my husband started to get like really tight and upset. And he said, you know, this is what's for dinner. This is what you're going to have. And then he looked at me and he said, I can't deal with this. Like he remembered, okay, I can't deal with this. And so I stepped in and I could bring a limit lovingly because, you know, it's the same limit I wanted to bring. He wanted to bring essentially, but I didn't have any angst around it. I could just say, sweetie, that's what's for dinner tonight. And then he wanted bread and he wanted this. And I said, no, I said, you know what? If you like to make yourself a salad, you're welcome to make yourself a salad. And he got all into it. You know, and he got out spinach and he got vegetables out and he cut them and he asked how to make salad dressing and he squeezed garlic and whatever. I mean, never mind that the salad dressing had about like 2 tons of mayonnaise in it in the end, which, but anyway, it's okay. It's okay. I brought a limit that was important to me and that was important to my husband, and he recognized that he was particularly triggered in that area and that I could come in and do it more peacefully. So we notice where one of us is strong and one of us is triggered, and then we can kind of parent in a conscious way there, right? Just be aware of where I'm probably not going to make good decisions and where he's probably not going to make good decisions, and support each other in that way. And the other thing I would say about partnering is that it's super important to appreciate your partner for what he or she does well. And that doesn't mean for what he or she does in the way that you would do it. Or like, okay, they're finally doing it the way that I want them to do it. Yay, you're awesome. No, I mean like right now, today, in the moment, what is it that you can appreciate about them? Because if there's one thing I can promise you, it is that they have the exact same hopes and dreams for your child as you do. You might parent completely differently. Your roots there might be completely different, but your goal is the same, right? You both want your little one to thrive, live a big life, not be held back by fear, make good friends, be kind, be thoughtful, pursue their dreams, right? No one's going to argue, and you won't even argue with me that your partner wants something different. So if that's the truth, then let's just sort of be thoughtful that the paths might be slightly different. That's okay. There's one other misconception that I think is going to be really useful to bring out into the light in terms of you being able to relax a bit if you have a partner or an ex who parents differently than you do. And that is the misconception that it is of utmost importance that our children always come first. So as I see it, you know, parenting, like everything else, there's like a pendulum of philosophies around it, even despite the research, okay? And most of us grew up with parents who felt like children needed to be seen but not heard, that punishment or consequences, timeouts was the way, perhaps you know, rewards or star charts or prizes when you did things well or behaved nicely. Okay, we grew up with that. And now this pendulum has swung, right? We have books about tiger moms and we have articles about helicopter parenting, and we feel like our child is the center of our world and all, you know, sort of what brings meaning to our life. If that is the only thing that brings meaning to our lives, we've got problems, okay? We need to not always be putting our children first. The reality is that if we are thriving, our children will follow in our footsteps. I know I'm just going to say that again. If you are thriving, if you are feeling good, if you are doing well, your child will pick up on that energy. Your child will thrive right along with you. It's not like magic. It's not like you don't have to use parenting strategies or think about your parenting. That's not what I mean. But when we're pouring all our resource into our children at the expense of our own emotional well-being, we are not going to get the results that we want. So, just for example, like right now, my family made a huge move across the world recently. My middle son has been super, super struggling, as have I. And I have spent a lot of time focusing on how to help him feel better. How can I support him through this? What resource does he need? How much listening does he need? How much time and what sort of time should I be spending with him in order for his life to go well? Well, it hasn't gotten me very far. And then about a week ago, I realized, you know what? I need to be focusing on me. Actually, I didn't realize that. Let me give my husband credit. He realized that. He said, how do you expect him to understand that everything's okay when you're walking around like somebody just died? And I thought, oh yeah, you got a point here. So what about me? So I started getting me the support that I needed. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. It looks like all different things, from listening partnerships to hikes with friends to whatever. But the point is that I turned my attention back on me, and it's only been, let's see, less than a week. He's already different. He already wakes up differently. Okay, so we can't always put our kids first, or maybe a better way to say it is putting ourselves first is putting our kids first. So let me share another story. There was a parent whose child would get super, super upset at preschool drop-off. And that child, she would cry and cry and cry and cry, the hang on to the leg, the whole thing, you can't leave. And this mother worked with me and realized that this was an opportunity to help her daughter work through separation anxiety. So we came up with a whole plan, and she would stay and she would leave slowly, and she would listen to all the feelings for as long as she could before she had to go to work. And over a period of time, that little girl was able to separate with a bye-bye, and maybe wasn't jumping out of her skin excited to be leaving her parents for the day, but was able to leave without the whole scene of upset. The dad, when he dropped off, wasn't stay listening. He would drop the child off and leave the child with the provider, and that was fine too. The child was able to cry with the daycare provider. That's fine. The dad, didn't have time, or not the intention, but didn't have the time, and that wasn't his parenting style. The kid's fine. She got through it, right? The mom did it one way, and this dad did it a different way, and they got through. But we need to be true, putting ourselves first, we need to be true to what feels good to us. It doesn't mean that we can't change, but if I were to have coached that mom to try to convince her husband to drop off in the way that she drops off, all that would have done was have created tension in their relationship, and it would have made everything worse. Because the more tension there is in the relationship, the harder it is for the kids. So it just doesn't make sense to work that way. Use your strengths, play to your strengths. She could listen, great. He didn't need to listen. He could do something else. He was super good at play. She wasn't. So he would connect in the evenings with like wild rides around the house and crazy, stuff. And the mom's like, whoa, fine. It's not, one's better than the other. Play to your strengths. So I think that's enough. I think I got my point across, right? The answer to the question, does your partner have to parent the hand-in-hand way, use the hand-in-hand parenting tools for your child to thrive? No, they don't, okay? You can parent in different ways and your children will thrive. Take care of yourself, nurture your relationship with your partner, use some of the strategies that I laid out, and you will raise an emotionally intelligent child, a kind child, a thoughtful child, a purposeful child, one who goes after their dreams and doesn't get held back by fear. So don't worry, go out, do the best you can, know you're gonna make mistakes, know you're gonna do it your own way. your partner or your ex will do it their way, and everything's going to be just fine.